ask the two other speakers to come on stage. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about our panels about content development initiatives for authors and publishers. So we have representatives from the government sector, and we also have representative from the private sector. So may I call now the representative from the National Commission for Culture and the Arts to speak on the Gawad Rolando Tino Writing Grant. Yes. Let us welcome the representative from the National Culture, NCCA, National Commission for Culture and the Arts.
Maraming salamat, sir. Minarapat ko pong hindi gumamit ng podium dahil medyo challenge po ako pagdating sa height. So, hindi niyo rin po ako ma-appreciate as a speaker. But before that, I would like to take this opportunity also to allow me to introduce to you our agency and what programs we implement and offer for the public. Earlier this morning, one of our resource person explained or opined that Filipinos are normally visual people. That's why I would like to introduce to you our agency through a audiovisual presentation. Paki-play po nung EVP. Isang research po, possible, isa po, transition.
Masdan ang imahinasyong Filipino. Ang bukal ng pagiging malikhain. Ang pagpapahayag ng mga taong pinagkaisa ng magkakatulad na kasaysayan. At damdaming umaaruga sa pagpapahalaga sa sarili at pagkatao ng mga mamamayan bilang isang bansa. Imahinasyon ang kaluluwa ng kultura at kalinangan ng isang bayan. Ang sigasig na walang gapos at hindi natatakdaan ng panahon o anumang pangyayari. Hinahayaan niya itong mahubog bilang instrumento ng kadakilaan. Iniipon ang mga minimithi ng isang bansa na nagkakaisa at binibigyang kapangyarihan ng kultura at kalinangan. Ang Pambansang Komisyon para sa Kultura at Mga Sining o National Commission for Culture and the Arts ay natatag. kumikilala bilang institusyon, bilang tagagawa ng mga alituntunin upang pagkaisahin ang pambansang pagsisikap para sa kultura at kalinangan. Ang NCCA ay kumikilala sa pananaw na ang kalinangang Filipino ay bukal na kagalingang pambansa at pandaigdig. Kaya nilalayon nitong pangalagaan ang mga pamanang Filipino, panatilihin ang mga tradisyon at sikaping isama ito sa kasalukuyang daloy ng kultura. Ipalaganap ang pag-unlad ng kalinangan at ipamahagi ang mga produkto ng kalinangan at kultura sa buong bansa at sa sandaigdigan. Nagsimula bilang Presidential Commission for Culture and the Arts, ang NCCA ay naging pambansang komisyon sa ilalim ng tanggapan ng Pangulo ng Pilipinas sa pamamagitan ng Republic Act 7356 na nilagdaan noong ika-3 ng Abril 1972. Bilang pangunahing ahensya ng pamahalaan para sa kultura, pinangangasiwaan at pinagtutugma-tugma nito ang mga gawain ng 6 na ahensyang pangkultura na nakaugnay, kabilang na ang National Museum, National Library of the Philippines, National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Cultural Center of the Philippines, National Archives of the Philippines, at Commission on the Filipino Language. Pinangangasiwaan din ito ang National Endowment Fund for Culture and the Arts o NEFCA na itinatag upang suportahan ang mga programang pangkultura ng bansa. Ang NCCA ay pinamamahalaan ng isang lupon ng mga komisyonado na binubuo ng 11 kinatawan mula sa lehislatura at ehekutibong sangay ng pamahalaan at 4 na kinatawan mula sa pribadong sektor. Sinasagawa nito ang misyon ng NCCA na pangalagaan ang pamanang Filipino. Ang Subcommission on Cultural Heritage ay nakikipagtulungan sa 6 na lupon: archives, art galleries, historical research, libraries and information services, monuments and sites, ganoon na din ang mga museums. Ang Subcommission on Cultural Communities and Traditional Arts ang nangangasiwa sa pagpapanatili at pagbubuo ng mga tradisyon sa 3 pambansang lupon na kumakatawan sa Northern Cultural Communities, Central Cultural Communities, at Southern Cultural Communities. Ang Subcommission on the Arts ay bumubuo ng 7 pambansang lupon: Architecture and Allied Arts, Cinema, Dance, Dramatic Arts, Literary Arts, Music, at Visual Arts. At sa panghuli, upang matiyak ang pambansang pagpapalaganap ng kalinangan at kultura, ang Subcommission on Cultural Dissemination ay pinagsasama-sama ang 3 pambansang lupon: Committee on Communications, Cultural Education, at ang Language and Translation. Ang nagsasagawa ng pang-araw-araw na pagpapatakbo at pagpapatupad ng mga balakid na sinusugan ng komisyon ay ang kalihiman na pinamumunuan ng punong tagapagpaganap. Sa kasalukuyan, ang NCCA ay humaharap sa hamon ng bagong milenyo, dala ang bagong simbolo ng kadakilaan. Ang sagisag ng alab ng haraya ng may dedikasyong nakatanaw sa hinaharap at magkakaisa sa adhikain. Masdan ang imahinasyong Filipino. Ang umaapoy na lagablab na pagkamalikhain na sumasiilalim sa masidhing simbuyo ng damdamin. Kadakilaan na nagmumula sa bawat produktong kultural na nilikha at iniingatan ng sambayanang Filipino. Ito ang Pambansang Komisyon para sa Kultura at Mga Sining o ang National Commission for Culture and the Arts na nagpapanatiling laging umaapoy, magpakailanman ang lagablab ng imahinasyon para sa kasalukuyan na nagbibigay kapangyarihan sa sambayanang Pilipino. Sumasabuhay sa adhikain na ang kalinangang Pilipino ay bukal ng kagalingang pambansa at pandaigdig. Sa hinaharap, inaasahan ang mas matatag na presensya sa mga rehiyon para sa mas malaganap na pagpapatupad ng mga polisiya at programang pangkultura. Ang lalo pang pagtataguyod ng mga creative industries. At ang patuloy na pagsigaw ng adhikain, ang ating kultura, marangal. Malikhain. Mapagbago. Filipino.
Maraming salamat po. Yan po ang Pambansang Komisyon para sa Kultura at Mga Sining. Marami po kami mga programang ini-offer, but for purposes of today's activity, we will be presenting only 2 programs related to content development. Malinaw po na ang nilalayo ng programang ito ay makapag-introduce sa inyo ng mga possible resource materials for possible publication. We do not publish books, but we can provide wealthy materials na maaaring makita ninyong angkop sa inyong focus as mga publishers. So for today, I will be presenting 2 programs. First na pwede nating maging resource ng mga materials for publication is through our research grants. Ang aming research grants was actually conceived in 2016. Ang intention nito ay ma-harmonize ang initiatives ng lahat ng sektor na ma-synchronize ang kanilang mga programs on research. Before po kasi kanya-kanya, museum, historical research, cultural communities, may kanya-kanyang program for research. But for now, ay binuo namin ng isang programa para makapag-identify ng isang ng research agenda na magkakaroon ng mukha ng research grants ng NCCA. So in 2017, we officially opened the program. We actually received 37 pa lang. But for now, on its 3rd year, we received 69 proposals. At nakikita po namin na in the next succeeding years ay mas lalaki pa yung aming audience for research proponents dahil naging intensive naman po ang aming promotion and technical assistance to introduce the program. So ito po yung ating research agenda, iba't iba pong aspekto ng kultura ang tinatakal dyan, mula creative industries, pagme-marry ng hard science and arts, ng hard sciences and the arts, humanities, local histories, IKSP, or mga buhay na dunong ng pamanang kultura, indigenous cultural heritage, analysis ng government policies, programs for culture and the arts, and dahil sumasabay tayo sa kung ano yung konteksto ng panahon, nag-o-offer din kami ng research on disaster risk reduction to the IKSP. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay po. Ang aming research grants actually have 5 categories. We offer grants or prize for thesis and dissertation, individual research, organization, or community research. On its first year, wala pa po ang community research. But as we progress and we talk with the community, nakikita na palagi kasing subject lang sila. So we would like to help them na conduct research about them and by them. Hindi lang sila laging subject. So we help the IPs, the members of the cultural communities on the different rigors ng research para maka-avail po sila ng grant nito. Next slide, please. Okay, for thesis dissertation, yung normal naman po na requirements, kailangan, syempre, approved ng school. Yun po. So we have 75,000 for thesis and dissertation naman po 150. So every year nag-identify kami ng number of slots open. Dependent po kasi ito sa budget na ibibigay sa amin. So hindi man appealing yung price na ino-offer namin, but it would really help din na rin po maituloy, maipurso nila yung kanilang thesis. Next slide, please. For individual, ang grant namin ay 300K, but we have certain requirements for them to submit to us para, syempre, validation, and then meron kasi mga ethics. So, yung mga may ethical issues, kailangan pinapasabit namin sila ng papers, and if it would involve cultural communities, meron po tayong tinatawag na free, prior, and informed consent. Hindi po maaari na mag-research sa community without the community allowing them. So, isa po yun sa mga requirements. And also, nagsasubmit din kami as part of the research packet for submission ng parang proof na research na sila before and certificate of authenticity na ito ay sila ang gumawa. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sa organization, same requirements. However, we require them, yung tinatawag po naming accreditation requirements. Since we will be releasing 500K sa mga organizations, may tinatawag tayong accreditation requirements na kailangan, registered sa civil service, sa SEC, and then financial statements po. For community research, medyo hindi ganun kaano ang treatment namin because we also offer this grant for people's organization. Pag people's organization, kailangan po lang ng validation ng community or endorsement ng LGU and institutions, cultural institutions or educational institutions. Next slide, please. Next slide po. Next slide. Okay, so ang research po natin for organization, may option sila to have parang research team. So, meron lang po tayong tinatawag na team lead. Next slide, please. So, ang process of approval, syempre po, first level, submission ng mga documents and then checking ng mga papers na required sa kanila. If nasabit po iyon, we will endorse it to the second level, which is blind vetting. So, ibig sabihin, hindi po alam ni proponent nung nag-propose kung sino ang nagve-vet or nagre-review ng kanyang proposal. Blind vetting po ang ginagamit namin. And then, after endorsement ng second level, we will endorse it again to the technical working group for final endorsement and board approval. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. So, nabanggit ko po kanina na ang research program ay ang isa sa pinakabatang program ng NCCA. Of course, meron kami yung mga competitive grants, meron ding mga technical assistance, and meron din kaming assistance on cultural mapping. But for the research program on its third year, we have identified na kailangang makomplete namin yung full education process. So meaning, yung first year niya, siguro ang focus lang, or ang naging focus lang natin is the production, the content development. Now, on its third year, na-identify namin na dapat na i-issue din ng dissemination and utilization. That's why we already conducted 2 colloquium one in 2018 and another just recently lang po in September, pinipresent ng lahat ng grantees ang kanilang research output in one venue. And then we'll have to discuss and then i-validate yung mga nakuha nilang result studies. And then baka meron pa, magbubunga pa ito ng mga next topics for research. Doon po namin siya, yun yung venue for that. And then, we also plan to publish a journal. And right now, we are in the process of finalizing the materials, yung mga articles, and yung registration ng ISBN sa National Library. Nakikipag-coordinate na rin po kami. And naghahanap din po kami, may call kami for printer for our journal. Yung pong tinatawag namin na salikultura or saliksik kultura. Yun po yung aming NCCA research grants. Now, for our second program, nabanggit po kanina under the Subcommission on Cultural Dissemination ay ang Pambansang Komite para sa Wika at Salin. At ang mandato po nito ay tulungan pong mapalaganap or mapromote pa, mas makilala pa ng marami ang ilan sa mga literary materials ng Pilipinas na hindi masyadong nakukover ng textbooks. So, ang focus ay on the intangible cultural heritage. So, tinawag po namin itong Gawad Rolando Estino bilang pagkilala sa ating pambansang alagad ng sining para sa panitikan. At ang tatlo pong kategorya para sa programang ito ay Epikong Bayan, Panulaan at Nobela. Ang bawat proposal sa bawat kategorya ito ay may mga hinihingi lang po na sample, kumbaga percentage ng sample works and translation. And the grant will be released in tranches. So, ang grant po for translation ay 250 at ang first tranche ay 25%. Upon submission po ng 50% ng translation, i-release na ulit po yung another 25%, na after completion, full grant na po ang i-release. Next slide, please. Next slide. Ayan. Bukas po ito kahit kanino. Teacher, wala pong sinasabi na ito ay para sa mga professional translator lang. Basta po ang mahalaga ay makapagsabi sila ng mga requirements na magiging focus on the evaluation of the translated work. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Medyo binibilisan ko na kasi parang sinabihan ako kanina na ganitong number of minutes lang daw po. So, sir, pakibalik lang po dun sa nauna. Ayan. Ito po, ito yung nangyari. So, nagkaroon kami ng call at ang deadline ng submission ay nung July 31. Sa ngayon po ay inaayos na mga documents and isa subject na po for review. It is expected by next year ay magkakaroon na ng awarding for the winners ng Gawad Rolando Tinio. Next slide. Ito po yung mga judges namin nung first set. Siyempre si National Artist Lumbera, si Dr. Mabanglo, si Dr. Abueg, Dr. Batnag, and Dr. Zafra. So sila po yung nag-review ng mga translation works na sinabit sa amin. Sige pa po. Next slide, please. Okay. So, noong 2018 po, ang aming winners, para po sa nobela ay si... Sorry, nakalimutan ko yung name. For novel, or short story, si Felino Garcia. Epikong Bayan, si Seti Padate from Marawi. And sa panulaan naman po ay si Christian Cordero. So sa Epikong Bayan po, ang material na ginamit ay darangin. Hindi ko po pinopromote, pero sinasabi ko lang po ang Epikong Bayan na ginamit ay darangin. So napakagandang material. And it's from the original language to Filipino. Yun lang po, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Corinnah. Thank you for sharing with us what the Commission has to offer in terms of grants and research grants and translation grants. Now, may we call on Mr. Paolo Sibal of Central Books to present what the private sector has to offer in terms of writing incentives. Let's give a round of applause for Mr. Paolo Sibal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to just say hello to everyone. Attorney Buhayin, thank you for still sitting there and listening to our talk. Madam Corinnah, Bolasco, everyone here. Okay, I'm not speaking in behalf of Phoenix and Central, which is the companies I represent, but instead, I'm speaking in behalf of the Book Development Association of the Philippines. The Book Development Association of the Philippines is an association that has publishers, writers, editors, illustrators, so on and so forth as members. And its primary objective is to uplift the book industry. And in this case, because of this mandate, the Book Development Association has been in charge, has been in charge of the book fair and the book fair funds. Now, to help the association allocate the funds to the correct book industry projects, we have created the Book Industry Grant. Now, the Book Industry Grant is open to organizations or associations that are with objectives to uplift any part of the book industry, improving the industry competitiveness, so on and so forth. We align the Book Industry Grant with the Book Industry Roadmap that we submitted maybe 4 years ago by now. Next, please. Okay. Now, there are 4 organizations that compose the organizing committee of the book fair. That's the Book Development Association of the Philippines, Philippine Booksellers Association, Inc., or Asian Catholic Communication, Overseas Publishers. And then these are the approving organizations that will approve the grant if your organization or association applies for the book industry grant. Next. I'm going to speed this along. The goals and objectives are the same as the book industry roadmap. Content creators, diverse domestic demand, integrate with the international community, innovation. Next. Okay, so it's self-explanatory, mindset for innovation. That's one of the goals. So as we flash these things, hopefully one of your projects, if you apply with us, will fall under one of the goals. Okay, next please. Quality of products and process. Okay, next. Okay, so to enhance the product excellence, so on and so forth. Go ahead. Okay, so also domestic demand, the quality of the books, and also the pricing, which includes any input that would affect price, whether it's tax or so on and so forth. Next. So, also with the purpose of integrating with ASEAN and beyond. So, it could be part of the organization's goal to affiliate with other associations outside the Philippines. That is also within the book industry goals. Equitable distribution of process by exploring systems, selling rights, creating high quality books, building reading culture, legislative agenda, creation of libraries. So as you can see, it's all aspects of the book industry. Next, please. Who may apply this is where it becomes. organization or association, so there's two requirements, which is the SEC and the NBDB registration. So those are the only two requirements for us to recognize you as a legitimate organization or association. Okay, so aligned with the fund committee's goals, identify the stakeholders who will benefit and what are the activities involved. Next. Okay, so project documentary requirements, it's pretty straightforward. There's no big requirement necessary. It's just like a concept paper. In your concept paper, it's the project, objectives, target market, or who will benefit, and then the budget, implementation plan and time frame, and then a little bit about your organization. It's all in, it's all in one submission. When to apply? Okay, this is a guideline. We want to approve all applicants after the book fair till January. So we're still open. And sometimes, if the need is urgent, it can be case to case. It can be relaxed naman. So this is actually an easy grant too. Okay. Let's just tackle this one. So below 100,000, it's the 4 organizations. We'll just meet together, BDAP, PBI, the Catholic Association, and the overseas publishers. And then we're going to approve whether it's 50,000, 80,000, 95,000, no problem. As long as we see the benefit to the industry. When it's above 100,000, this committee suggests its approval, and then the BDAP board will just say yes or no, that seems like a good idea or not. That's to protect the funds, because it's starting to become big money. Next. Okay, so you enter in an agreement, determine the parties involved, and then the duration, so on and so forth. Next. Okay. So these are just examples of, some examples of associations that have benefited from the industry. One is the PBI, the Booksellers Association. The amount was 100,000, and then it was to educate the people in the book industry about the new train law and its ramifications to the book industry. It was very successful. The room was almost this big, and it was totally full, and it came with free food. So those are some of the pictures of the event, Quezon City Sports Club. There. Okay, and then the Overseas Publishers Association was also, they had 2 projects. So the first project, 80,000. The second project, another 80,000. Excuse me. Both projects were about how to get your book published, specifically with big-name foreign publishers. So they had Filipino speakers who were published abroad by the big-name publishers, and they spoke in the MIBF in one of the meeting rooms upstairs. So, to 2018, 2019, and these are some of the pictures of the talk. Okay, so there was only 4 applicants so far. That's why I'm here today, because I want people to know that the grant is available and it can help. As long as it helps the book industry, why not? Why not give it a shot? As long as the project is altruistic and for the book industry, why not? The only project that wasn't approved was the Lopez Museum and Library. They were requesting 250. The only downside there was it was book related. Yes, they were going to publish a coffee table book, but it was, you know, first of all, it was for profit, and then secondly, the book wasn't naman about the book industry. It was more of a, you know, vanity publishing thing, and so the board disapproved the grant. So that's it. That's it for my 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paolo Sibal. Actually, it's 9 minutes. Thank you for sharing what the Book Development Association of the Philippines has to offer. Now let me go to my presentation. I'll be presenting grants, writing grants, manuscript grants from the National Book Development Board. So, next slide, please. So for the National Book Development Board, we have 2 types of grant. One is the National Book Development Trust Fund, the NBDTF Manuscript Development Grant, and the second one is the Translation Subsidy Program. Next slide, please. So the legal basis again for these 2 grants is the Book Publishing Industry Development Act of 1995, RA 8047. So one of the conditions of the RA 8047 is to create conditions conducive for development and production of books in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So now this is the National Book Development Trust Fund. Next slide. Previous slide, please. Previous slide. Since authorship is one of the major components of book publishing, the national book policy obliged the state to create a dynamic and conducive environment for the promotion of Filipino authorship and other creative activities in book development. Republic Act 9521, or the National Book Development Trust Fund, mandates the National Book Development Board to support and promote Filipino authorship through a writing grant that helps authors write books, especially in science and technology, and in subject areas wherein locally authored books are either few or non-existent. The grant aims to preserve Philippine culture and address the need for Filipino authored books. Next slide, please. So these are the categories available since 2013 for manuscript wherein locally authored books are either few or non-existent. So like as mentioned earlier this morning, we have categories on local history, we have categories on science, we have categories on gender studies, agriculture, intellectual property rights, and we also have categories on literature. So we have categories on novels written in Ilocano, biography written in Cebuano, and other folklore and other materials on literature. Next slide, please. So since 2016 and 2018, we work with DepEd to help develop supplementary reading materials for senior high school. So we had categories on environment at senior high school and mother tongue. So that's from grades 1 to 3. So for mother tongue, we had categories on environment, people, places, and events, arts and culture, short fiction for children. So for mother tongue, 5 languages were chosen. These are Waray, Maranao, Kapampangan, Maguindanao, and Tausug. For senior high school, that's grades 11 and 12, we had entrepreneurship, environment and disaster risk reduction and management, market research, technical vocational education. And for all other grade levels, we had categories on anthologies of Filipino literature during colonial and pre-colonial period, anthologies of music, arts, physical education and health, basic computer literacy, and gender development. These were suggested also by us through the Bureau of Learning Resources of the Department of Education. Next slide, please. So who are eligible for the grant? So this is open to all NBDB registered stakeholders. So meaning writers who are registered with us, or if you want to avail of the grant, you can always register with the NBDB for you to avail of the grant. So what are the requirements? Basic that's listed here, it's the applicant CV, sworn statement that the work is original, a project proposal, same with NCCA, we also require project proposal, and same with BDAP, we also require project proposal. And of course, since I've mentioned earlier that you have to be an NBDB registered stakeholder, we will require you for the certificate of registration. And for this manuscript development grant, we require initial 25% content of the manuscript. Next slide, please. So the chosen work will receive a maximum grant of 250,000 each. So that's about USD 4,500. Previously, these are the grant recipients who were awarded and eventually got published. So we had a field guide to flight from Ateneo de Manila University Press. We have Traditional Medicine in Colonial Philippines published by University of the Philippines Press. We have Kagabihon sa Sendong, published by Capital University. Next slide. We also have Kasaysayan at Vulnerabilidad, published by DLSU Publishing House. Guidebook on Proper Use of Medicinal Plants, published by National Institutes of Health from UP Manila. And we have Panangsapul Itipuraw Caballo, published by Saniata Publications. And we also have Nilala, published by National Commission for the Culture and Arts. Munudi, which was eventually published by Cordillera Studies Center. And Kalinawa, also published by Saniata Press. We also have a series on women scientists written for children. This was published by the Bookmark Incorporated. Now let me go to the translation subsidy program. This is the other grant offered by the National Book Development Board. So the National Book Development Board of the Philippines offers translation subsidies to Philippine publishers to translate existing published books in Philippine language to English or any other foreign language. The subsidy program aims for a wider dissemination of Philippine culture, art, and literature locally and globally by allowing readers to read extant Philippine published works in their native languages. Next slide, please. Currently, those eligible to the program are 1. Philippine publishers who intend to translate and publish books in the Philippine language to English or any other foreign language. And number 2, Philippine publishers who sold translation rights of published Philippine work to a foreign translation. So the licensee and translation contracts must have been executed and prior to for the second eligibility requirement. The original work must be published in the Philippines and written by a Filipino author in any of the country's languages. So that's either Filipino, English, or the other Philippine languages. Next slide, please. Eligibility requirements. So a contractual agreement must exist at the time of the application between the rights holder and the publisher of the original work, granting translation rights to the publisher applying for translation subsidy program, unless the work is in public domain. So if it's an open source document, so there is no need to ask for permissions. Licenses and translation contracts must be already signed at the time of the application. Other eligibility requirements, the book must have at least 48 printed pages, except if it's a children's fiction. Application for translation subsidy program must be done prior to the printing stage. Next slide. So what are the eligible genres? So we have fiction, novels, novellas, or short story collections, poetry, children's fiction, biography and autobiography, graphic novel, creative nonfiction, essay, literary criticism, academic non-school books, and scientific works. Next slide, please. What are the requirements? So one, here's a list, completed application form, publisher's profile, the contract between the rights holders, profile of the foreign publisher, if applicable, signed license agreement, also if applicable, signed translator contract, a copy of the translator's CV, and sample work, 8 to 10 pages of translated work, and a one-page evaluation of the translator's work. Next slide, please. So evaluation, all entries will be screened by the NBDB Secretariat and approved by the governing board. Applications will be evaluated according to the chosen book artistic merit, the publisher's and translator's credentials, and the quality of the marketing and promotional plans. One aspect of the particular concern to the NBDB is the quality of translation. Only translations of a high standard can be granted subsidies. Next slide, please. The results. Translation subsidy results will be announced 1 month after the application deadline. Translation subsidy recipients will be notified through email. For successful applicants, the NBDB will give a letter of offer with the terms and conditions and performance measures of the translation subsidy program. Notified applicants have 2 weeks to accept the offer by signing a letter of offer reply slip. Failure to send the reply slip within 2 weeks will forfeit the translation subsidy. Next slide, please. So the grant program will cover a maximum amount of 450,000. That's about USD 1,700. Next slide, please. So ways forward. So the question is there enough discussion in global publishing about Philippine authorship in translation? So to be translated is to be understood outside of your cultural niche. So to encourage more people to read Philippine authorship, NBDB aims through the Philippine content. NBDB aims to make Philippine content more accessible through its publishing grant. This initiative is envisioned to spring up hope to increase the number of Philippine authorship and content translated, published, and distributed outside of the Philippines. We have several platforms for trading and translation of Philippine authorship. International trade events like Frankfurter Book Messe is one. And this has been the biggest platform so far to support Philippine publishing sector to reach the global market. This international book fair is very much committed to enabling, helping, and setting up publishing infrastructure all over the world. And as the Frankfurter Book Messe director Jürgen Buss says, translations are the most important thing to understand other cultures. So that's it. Thank you very much. So if you have questions for our speakers from NCCA, from BDAP, and from me, NBDB, the floor is now open for Q&A. Any questions from the crowd? So I guess everything's clear. So do you have any parties interested to apply for the grant at NCCA and BDAP and grant from NBDB? Yeah, I see some nods here and some nods also there. So with that, I would like to end our presentation. So just to make time for the next presentation. Thank you very much for listening.